I've been wanting to do this video for a long time, and I haven't because I haven't really. It's weird. It's one of those videos. I have a lot of family that served in the military, and military tradition was big in my family, especially amongst the family members that I respected, and friends that served in the United States military. And I wanted to be very careful because I didn't want to offend family, actually, even though I don't really talk to any family. These are extended family members. But who knows? Maybe they watch my channel. I really don't know. And it's out of respect for my grandfather, who was very important to me. He was very proud of his military service. And it's interesting. He was proud of his military service in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And out of respect for him, I kind of postponed making this video for a while. But I was watching Yashanka show, and that guy Sergey, and he was talking about how Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan's support of the Afghan freedom fighters, as we called them in the news, really damaged. This is why the Soviet Union had so many losses, as opposed to the American forces in the 20 years war with Afghanistan. Also, we use military contractors, mercenaries. It's a fancy way of saying mercenaries. And we've lost quite a bit. We've lost around 6,000 troops, if you count the mercenaries and the soldiers. And one of the reasons I wanted to get into this, if the United States military is so great, and it is great, why do we keep losing wars? The United States has not effectively won a war since World War II, and you can't really count World War II. Why can't you really count World War II? The problem with World War II is we entered World War II basically at the end. Hitler had already fought a war on both fronts and was ready to have ready to have Churchill and Stalin to sign peace accords. Hitler had effectively won World War II by the time the United States had entered it. And the reason the United States had entered it is, although the United States had claimed to be a non-belligerent, we were supporting belligerents of Japan and Germany and Italy and Spain. What do I mean by that? Well, the United States was giving aid and comfort to the USSR, Great Britain, the French resistance, etc. So when people say, and I do not support the Japanese method of war during World War II, but I'm going to get into this also. If you want to warmonger, like a lot of people want to warmonger, if you want to win the war, and I don't think the goal is to win the wars, and I'm going to explain that in a second too, but if you want to win a war, you're better to fight like the Japanese or the Vietnamese or the North Koreans than you are the Americans. And I think what you see is essentially these wars are not being fought to be won. Okay, I don't think they're being fought to be won. Now, whether that's purposeful or simply a side effect of us obeying international laws that limit the types of actions we can take, I personally don't know. I'm not personally involved in the military, and I don't have connections to anybody that's personally involved in the military. However, it doesn't take a genius or a military tactician or a four-star general to realize why we keep losing. And the reason why is the U.S. military has magnificent, devastating power. Okay? We have kinetic weapons like the rods of God, okay, which are magnificent. You can eradicate an entire continent with such a weapon. We have the nuclear, of course, we were the first country to have nuclear weapons, and we were and we do have great ability to hit anywhere in the world through our nuclear submarines and aircraft carriers and things like that. So the technology and the magnificent power of destruction, of absolute annihilation, is grand that the United States military has. But this is not how wars are won, okay? Because what good is a country that has been left as a smoking crater in the ground? It's of no use. This is not the reason to fight a war. The reason to fight a war is not to completely annihilate a whole country. Okay, it's to conquer the country and to subjugate the country. And the fact of the matter is, the United States does not really have a need to subjugate other countries. We have implemented Manifest Destiny in a military fashion, and we have created the continental United States and Hawaii and other areas that we got after the Spanish-American War. And this is big enough. This is maybe too big, obviously, for the United States to handle, because we can't handle closing our own borders and making sure that people aren't coming in here from other countries like Cuba, Mexico, the rest of Latin America, etc. Maybe we have too much territory to properly maintain the territory. I think more people should read books such as The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. Our leaders should be emphasizing the ideals of Machiavellianism more than the ideals of democracy building. And that's a big, big, big problem we have. Another problem is if our magnificent weapons of destruction are not how wars are won, how are wars won? It seems to me that in the 21st century, technology is not what's winning wars. What's winning wars is low-tech, asymmetrical warfare. What is asymmetrical warfare? Some people call it guerrilla warfare. Asymmetrical warfare is warfare that is waged not by large armies, but by small groups that encompass large armies, not platoons, but small groups, small teams of people that go out and they're minimally armed, and they go out and they hack to bits the enemy, they perform acts of sabotage, they do things, and we do have, such as the Army Rangers, the U.S. Navy SEALs, the Marine Forest Recon, the Air Force Special Forces that I don't know the name of off the top of my head. So it's not like we don't have groups of people that are trained in asymmetrical warfare. It's just that's not what we go to. That's not all of our military specializes in asymmetrical warfare. However, when you're fighting a war with an enemy like the Taliban or the Viet Cong or even the Japanese to a large extent, you're dealing with people that are well trained in asymmetrical warfare. And another thing is hand-to-hand combat. Now, the United States military probably has the finest, most precise, most well-tuned hand-to-hand combat instruction of any military in the world. Now, I'm going to leave links to the military combat systems of Great Britain and the United States, which is what we use, in the description. But I'm also going to leave links on how North Koreans train, and how South Koreans train, and the Japanese ideology of warfare. And you will see another instance. Like, it's funny when I get people in my comments section that'll say, I was a soldier, and I fought in this war, or I fought in that war, and I'm gonna beat the snot out of you, nah. As I said, I was trained in karate by a person that trained our Marines how to fight, okay? How to take care of business on the battlefield. I'm more than confident in my ability to quote, to handle myself against any average U.S. soldier, member of the naval personnel, an airman, or anything like that if somebody decided to try to, quote, beat the snot out of me. The truth of the matter is the United States military, despite the fact that we do have excellent hand-to-hand combat instruction, the shape of the average soldier is not the finest in the world. Okay, we are not emphasizing proper diet. We are not emphasizing proper conditioning. We are not emphasizing enough. For God's sakes, we have transgendered people in the United States Armed Services at this point in time. Okay, that should give you a hint as to the physical condition of the soldiers in the United States military. But my point is that many people, the United States has grown very soft over the years. So while we are training our soldiers once or twice in hand-to-hand combat, there are other groups of people like the South Koreans, the North Koreans, the Japanese, and a lot of these radical Islamic countries where they're tough people. They are brought up to fight, kill, and die. They are not weak people. And I've had a number of friends over the years, many of whom had fought in Vietnam. The gentleman that I was friends with in Georgia that unfortunately passed away, I don't know the exact particulars. I think it was related to COVID-19. He fought in Vietnam, and I've had other friends that have fought in Vietnam. As you can see, I make friends that are quite a bit older than me usually. But ultimately, the South Koreans, the U.S. soldiers were absolutely terrified of the South Korean regulars because of how brutal and competent they were at murdering the enemy with their bare hands. There was a story that the gentleman, he was an airman in Vietnam, and one of the stories he told me is there was a North Korean picking off members of one of our encampments in Vietnam, and there was a South Korean soldier. Now, I don't know how true this is. I'm going by what this guy told me, so I have no way of verifying it. This is based on his eyewitness account. I do believe him, but essentially this South Korean, the North Vietnamese were in a cave, and this South Korean soldier scaled the wall while the Americans and other Americans, Australians, British, whoever it was, that were distracting they weren't distracting. This is who the Vietnamese were picking off one by one, and they were having fun, like shooting them in the ankles and things like that, according to this guy. So this South Korean guy goes up there, scales a cliff, allegedly, and kills about 12 North Vietnamese with a knife. No gun, no fancy weapons, a knife. Now, some of our soldiers that are equipped, that are trained in asymmetrical warfare, know how to do this. In many ways, this is who trained a lot of these other militaries, like South Korea. But, my point is, as I said, we haven't won a war since World War II. Look at the shape of the average American now compared to if anybody's old enough. Now, I'm lucky enough that I had grandparents that grew up, and my grandfather had served in World War II, and my grandmother was on the home front in World War II. But Americans were tougher during World War II. They didn't have as much fat hanging off their jaws. Pastimes during World War II included things like boxing, swimming, wrestling, shooting, hunting, outdoorsmanship. These were the things, sailing, these were things that people did in America during the World War II generation, prior to the war and during the war and after the war. Even up, even into the 80s, that you're more likely. I mean, when I was a kid in the 1980s, there weren't many fat people. The fat people were the ones that were picked on. It was very rare to see a fat person when I was a kid. There weren't many of them. There might have been one or two fat kids in a school of 500 kids. Okay? Unfortunately, later in life, when I was a teenager, I became one of the fat kids, but that was due to psychotropic medicines. My point is that it wasn't really until the mid-90s to early 2000s that you started seeing the softening of the American population. And if you look at the American population now, you see utter weakness. You see people that can't handle being offended. Okay? Imagine if one of them got shot by enemy fire. You dig what I'm saying? We do not have people in this country that are hardened enough for combat. And then you're going to try and make them so in boot camp. It's just not going to happen. People have different compositions today, or constitutions today, than they did in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And on top of that, we have not won a war. As I said, we have not won a war since World War II. We lost the Korean War. Okay, and people go, no, we didn't. We still have South Korea. Anything but the utter submission of the enemy is a loss. And that's why, like that Yun-Mi Park chick, she thinks that America should help blah, blah, blah with North. Why? So we can lose again? North Korea or South Korea is not worth one American life or one American penny. It just isn't. They're not Americans. Americans need to worry about Americans. And sorry to say it, but North Koreans, Afghanis, these people are not Americans. And people go, you believe in Pan-Americanism? Yes, I do. And I believe that that is where the United States needs to turn its attention to, is this region where it matters. But my point is that the United States lost Korea. If we won Korea, there would be no DPRK. You get it? No DPRK if we won Korea. Wouldn't happen. Could we win a conflict with North Korea? Did we win a conflict with the Taliban after 20 goddamn years? No. Who do you think's more equipped to fight an invading enemy? North Korea, who are extremely well trained in killing and well armed with weapons from their allies like Russia, China, Iran, Syria, etc., with modern weaponry, and being trained to kill people with some of the best hand-to-hand combat? Okay, the Korean martial arts are very effective. And if you don't believe me, you will see in the description the training methods that are used by the North Korean Special Forces, as well as the South Korean Special Forces and the American Special Forces. But the thing is, the difference between how the American Special Forces are taught and how the Koreans are taught, remember, the Koreans are taught martial arts from the time they're little tiny children. Okay? Most South Koreans and North Koreans learn martial arts in school. I don't know about North Koreans. I do know, because I have met quite a bit South Koreans, they do learn Taekwondo in school. Okay? Kind of like how the Japanese learn Judo and, Judo and archery and Kendo and these things in school. In America, what do we learn in school? Let's play some games with nets. Let's do some square dancing. Oh, I hurt my pinky. Oh, let's try and make it halfway up a rope. This is what we're learning in school. Compare that to, say, Japan, where they're learning Kendo, karate, judo, And if they're not learning it in school, they obviously have a culture that promotes the learning of these systems of combat. In the United States, we don't even encourage our children to box or wrestle. Oh, football. Let's play football. Football is very popular. We like to play football. Football. Who remembers what happened to that Tillman dude in Afghanistan? Maybe I'll put a link to that. I believe he went nuts, if I remember correctly. But the fact of the matter is, football is not the same thing as training on how to fight. It's just not. So you can think that football is going to make you more capable of fighting, but football does not turn you into Bobby Boucher. Okay? Football does not equal Bobby Boucher. That's what you got to know. Bobby Boucher was already crazy prior to football. Okay? That's how the water boy went from the water boy to Bobby Boucher. Okay? But the fact of the matter is, these other warrior cultures that you have, I'll get into it in a second, but these other cultures that you have that encourage training in hand-to-hand combat, weapons combat, etc., you don't see that in the United States. You see the encouragement of, don't offend me. You better not offend me. If you offend me, you're going to hurt my feelings and I'll tell on you. Okay, different culture. Now, another thing is, during the Vietnam War, and I'm going to leave a link to the Hells Angels press conference in the description, the Hells Angels had volunteered to go over to Vietnam to fight with asymmetrical warfare on the behalf of the United States against the Viet Cong. They obviously were turned down by the president, but the fact of the matter is, okay, I guess this video would be a waste of time if I didn't say what I think the remedy to our losses would be. Number one, I'm pretty sure the primary reason that we're waging wars all around the world now, and why we risk falling like Rome, who spread her legions too thin, the reason we're doing this is, unfortunately, because certain people have an interest in making money off of selling weapons of destruction to the United States and other countries. And I think that is the goal of war anymore, is to keep these cesspools of gore going as long as possible, with no end in sight. The lack of an end is the more weapons sold. And this is not how you win a war. This is how you sell weapons. If the United States wants to win wars, they should stop concentrating on technology. And I'm not saying they shouldn't. I am a huge fan of DARPA. DARPA is a beautiful organization. DARPA created the internet that's allowing me to make this video. DARPA is very good at promoting certain healthcare systems. DARPA is promoting super soldier programs to help with the transhumanist movement, whether they know it or not. And the one beauty of DARPA is what DARPA makes, the public gets eventually. It's not like other countries. For example, the internet, everybody that says, DARPA's bad, military technology is bad. Well, your cell phone, your internet, your two-way radio if you have one, a lot of things that we have come from DARPA, come from military research projects. My thing is, I think that it should all be nationalized, and that we should limit for-profit companies' participation in military research. But to go further, if the military wants to win wars, we need to fundamentally alter the culture of America. We need to embrace a culture of fitness. We need to cast aside this capitalist junk food culture. We need to encourage people to eat more like the recommendations of Adele Davis and other popular recommendations by popular nutritionists from back in the day, as opposed to it's okay to eat, I forget what it is, like frickin' 10 teaspoons of sugar or something. No, it's not okay. You should shoot for 0 teaspoons of sugar a day unless it's coming from fruits and vegetables. My point is that number one, you have to change the culture. That can come from the government. Okay, the government changed the culture and turned it into this fairy culture of, I don't want to be offended, and if I'm offended, I'll tell on you, trigger warning. Okay, the government did that. The government can also fundamentally alter the United States culture to embrace health, fitness, and the ability to practice violence effectively and outdoorsmanship effectively. I believe there needs to be a resurgence, even if it's by the government, of scouting. Scouting that does not involve the Boy Scouts or anything like that. It needs to be more militaristic in origin. And it should still uphold the values of scouting, but it needs to be more militaristic and more geared towards competency. There also needs to be, I think that the public school system needs to embrace karate. It needs to embrace teaching karate and boxing and things of that nature, and start going away from the games with nets and the square dancing and the I'm offended culture. And it needs to start going more into embracing maybe not karate. Karate and boxing might be a little too much, but what about judo? What about jujitsu? What about these systems of combat that could be embraced? We could go back to having archery in public schools. Oh my God, archery. Okay, but years and years and years ago, archery, even shooting, they had shooting ranges in public schools years ago. You'd never see that this day and age. So my point being is that would be the first point. We got to change the culture. Then you got to change the military. You got to change the way the military engages with the enemy. You have to change it to a more asymmetrical approach. Instead of having special forces units that know how to implement asymmetrical warfare, every single soldier, marine, sailor, airman, etc. should be trained heavily and how to perform an asymmetrical warfare. And this might take longer, but it will have to happen if we are going to engage with enemies that are engaging us like this. We need to be able to engage like this. And this comes back to martial arts. A lot of people wondered why, when I took Tung Soo Do, a lot of people wondered why I'd read up on karate or taekwondo or judo or jujitsu, and why I would study how people utilized weapons such as the kama and the sai and the knife and these things. The thing is, if you don't understand the tactics, every martial art is different tactically. Every means of warfare has different tactics. Asymmetrical warfare has different tactics than the way warfare is done with, big companies of people. So you need to, if you want to understand how these people are engaging in combat, you need to understand, if you want to understand how to attack back, you need to understand how these people are attacking. So in order to do this, you yourself need to be trained in how to do it. And then you need to engage like that. And that's all for this video. Follow the links in the description.